Okay, so then we'll do the short. So one of the things I never really processed enough in this parsha, but I think it's important. So obviously the lion's share of the parsha is the saga of Eliezer going down to find a wife for Yitzchak, and one of the strangest moments in the story is the test thing that Eliezer does, right? He davens to Hashem and he says, look, I'm going to ask for water, and if the woman responds that she's not going to give water to me, she's going to give to the camels. So then that's the woman for Yitzchak. And the Gemara even talks about this as a paradigm of a possibly misguided tefillah that God allowed to go right, even though it really could have gone horribly wrong. But that's what happens. And the seeming simple pshat of it is that he's testing her chesed, not just her chesed, but her going above and beyond for chesed. Right? I mean, that's what we all learn, and I think that's all true. What's really odd about this story is that it tests something else, which is unintuitive. What else does it test besides for kindness and devotion to causes of kindness?
Willing to take time out for others.
Sure, but that's all under chesed, right? This is all the obvious ones. But there's something actually there which is being tested that really strikes me as unintuitive, which is...
Which pasuk are you looking at?
Well, just think about it. Oh, the test of the test of Rivka.
Familial relation?
What?
Familial...
No. Physical endurance. Right? Meaning, people can be willing to be kind, right? Can be willing to be kind, but that's a lot of water for a lot of camels. And especially if she's as young as Chazal say she is, right? Chazal put her at 3, right? But even if you think she's a little bit older, right? You could have a girl who is kind and, right? The story could have gone that, right? In fact, if we all sort of imagine this story, right, it could have been that Eliezer, right, goes to, she says, I would love to give you water, I'd love to give your camels, and she goes and she brings the water for him, she brings for the camels, and like 3 hours later she collapses after having done everything that she possibly could, and you'd look and wow, she is the paradigm of chesed because she's willing to help other people until she physically collapses. But the way the Psukim describe it is that, right, he's expecting something which is so physically tasking that you don't even realize there's a certain level of right, this is like, the test they have in the army, right?
So there's a physical test and a personality test.
Right, but which we don't focus on because we're like, well, we just take it as given, like, this is hard, but like, you could do it if you wanted to, but that's not true, right? Like, it's... and at some level, right now, you could just say that Eliezer didn't really think it through, so Hashem, sort of miraculously arranged it that she would have the strength, or that maybe I'm wrong. Maybe this is something that everyone could do if they push themselves enough. But I'm not at all sure that is factually correct. So let me just suggest maybe another possibility.
Doesn't it say that she ran?
Yeah, I mean, not everyone could do that, right? What if she, right? Like, let's say the story had been. Right, lahavdil, right, or whatever, for imagination's sake, that she had, the week before, she had broken her leg and she was in the cast, so she hobbled over to the water, right? You would say she's even kinder, right? But like she just, right, there is a certain level here with the ability to run, the ability to do this is not just a chesed test, right? This is, right, this sounds like those tests in the army, right? That you take a 70-mile run with your knapsack on your back, right? It's, right, not just are you willing to, or the other soldiers on your back, to see that not only do you want to save your fellow soldier, is your heart in the right place, but can you physically schlep the soldier on your back for whatever number of miles, right? I mean, that's what this sounds like. Which, coupled with another fact, now you could just say I'm just making a big deal of it, but there is another fact that leads me to believe that this is not true, that this is not just accidental, and maybe this is part of the issue at hand. Which is that we learn in next week's parsha that Yitzchak has an affinity for people of physical endurance and physical abilities, right? Esav, right? Because Yitzchak is portrayed as very much not that, right? Yitzchak is very much passive. By the next parsha, he is blind, right? Meaning he needs other people. He relies on other people. And you learn in next week's parsha that who are the two people he relies on? Rivka and Esav. And not just does he rely on them, he relies on them in the same way, such that Rivka can arrange that Yitzchak can trick, right, that Yaakov can trick Yitzchak, or whatever you think is happening in that story, but we'll talk about that next week, by providing the same thing that Esav would have provided. Right? Meaning, essentially, Yaakov ends up being able to provide what Esav provided, but because Rivka is really the one who can provide it. Right? Which means that if you think about Yitzchak's life, right, he has an affinity, or maybe more, he has a need for a certain type of personality in his life. Now, we talked about last week that he's the continuation of Avram, right? He's a more passive figure in that sense, and the strength of that sort of continuity. But Rivka is an Avram figure, right? She's the one who leaves her family and all that. But I think what you might get a hint at here is that Rivka is also the right match for Yitzchak, not just because she's kind, but because she has a certain physical stamina that Yitzchak, again, do I know what Yitzchak is like at this point in his life? I don't. I know that by the end of his life, he really is reliant on people who have that type of physical energy, right? Those physical capabilities. I just wonder whether the fact that this test that Eliezer puts her through is, at some level, also a test of endurance, right? Is that because Yitzchak doesn't just need someone who has the willingness, because maybe he has the willingness too, right? But his personality comes across in Chumash as someone who also needs, as a complement, someone who has those, right, who has the physical energy to accomplish certain things. And I wonder whether that's part of what's going on here, because otherwise, right, it is a bit strange that the test that Eliezer ends up proposing is not just one of Chesed, right, but is one, again, in Chazal's world, this is definitely true, right? The fact that a 3-year-old is capable of doing this, right? Like, forget about willingness, right? My now 4-year-old, but still, right? My 4-year-old could not do this. Not like he wouldn't want to, right? It's just like, as helpful as they want to be, they'll collapse after 20 minutes of this, right? Of schlepping water, or maybe, right? If we made it for 20 minutes, right? But you're talking 10 camels, right? Meaning, I don't know how much this is, but hours and hours of work. So that's just chomer l'machshava. I don't know if it's right. But I think there is, when you really sort of imagine the picture, there is something. I think there has to be something there. I haven't fully worked it out, but those are at least my initial thoughts on this. Okay.